she had a variety of colors.
It was just as bad last week.
You're not
The TV
focused
itself
on
is
one.
good. I mean,
That's
so
right.
it's even worse. I'm going to fix it right now. But I had to crank up to it's purple on the screen. That's blue there. So that TV, I had to turn the sharpness, the brightness, the backlight, and the contrast all the way cranked just for it to get to what it was. So you know what I said? I'm just going to zoom out. I'm just getting him. Well, we should have a new TV.
Carrots also. The girls are also with us. All right. Well, welcome. Good morning. Hope you all will bear with me a bit today. It's sort of a rough night of sleep, so if I say something crazy, just blame it on that. So I'm going to go ahead and say a prayer to get us started, and then we'll go ahead. Heavenly Father, God, we thank you for today. We thank you for everything that you do for us, God. God, I'm thankful for Jesus. God, I'm thankful for your word. God, I'm thankful for this church, for this church family, God. God, I pray that you would be with us this morning. I pray that you would guide us. I pray that you would just lead us and restore us, God. We pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. I'm going to start drilling this before we get started every time, just because I feel like this is sort of the summing up the book. Oh, we've got an escapee. Does anyone remember the way that the author, Imes, summarizes the first two of the 10 Commandments? Do y'all remember that? We reviewed it a little bit last week, and then we covered it 2 weeks ago. Worship Yahweh only. Represent Him well. That is no idols and taking the Lord's name in vain, but it's representing Him well. So I'll keep bringing that one up because I feel like it's connects pretty well to how Jesus sums up the law too. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbors yourself, right? So I feel like those connect. All right, this morning we are going to, I thought about making, I don't even know if y'all can read that. It says ready to roll. It was like, roll the gospel chariot along or something. You know, it's like, I'm not going to make y'all sing it, but sorry. Last week, we talked about the covenant code, the book of the covenant. That's that section of laws that shows up after the 10 Commandments. We talked about that little fiasco with the bull, the golden calf. Wasn't real good. We talked about how the priests and tabernacles came up. So, in all of this, the Israelites had camped at Sinai for some time. Anyone know how long they were there? What?
3 years.
Was it 3 years? I was thinking it was 1 year. I did put it in my notes, so it was, yeah, sorry.
Well, they left and then they came back and they left over the course of 4 years.
Yes. Yeah, there was a lot of looping around in there. So what they get to find out at Sinai is who they are. They are God's representatives, right? And that is represent God well. They're going to find out what God's expectations are for them, how to deal with their failures, right? That's what all of the temple things are about, is how do you handle some of their mistakes, right? I was about to say, you better not go in that room back there.
He'll kick Ryan out.
Yeah. So something big is about to come up though. Moses is about to meet God face to face. This is just a really neat story that I think I had just sort of read over and not seen when I would first read through some of these stories. And it's like, it's impressive. So, question for you. What do you think about when you think about God? Do you have a picture in your head? Or like put up on my slides here, like a characteristic?
Father.
Father, okay.
Powerful. Powerful.
Powerful, okay.
Have a throne.
A throne, okay.
Kind of get a grandfatherly picture.
My grandfather, the white hair and the beard, okay.
I don't know why.
Yeah. Say again?
Michelangelo's.
Yeah. The finger. Yeah. It's like there. Tag, you're creative.
Oh.
Do you think of someone holding you to rules? Does that make sense? Is this a positive or a negative picture? It could be both. It's probably changed throughout your life, right? Does God go
I think
ahead?
he holds us somewhat to rules,
Mm-hmm.
but he's also gracious when we break them.
Yeah.
We're not rebellious kids.
Yeah. Does God seem near or far to you? Near? We probably all have different answers, right? I'm trying to give y'all some categories to think about this. I have the second to last one. Does your view of God somehow always agree with you? Because if it does, you might have something else in your head besides God. A.W. Tozer wrote, "What comes into our minds when we think about God is the most important thing about us." I don't know if that's true, but it's an interesting thing.
We that active category.
Yeah. A.W. Tozer wrote, "What comes into our minds when we think about God is the most important thing about us." Again, that's just what he wrote, but interesting to think about. This is signs of a healthy view of God, the presence of intimacy, so nearness, movement or growth through the various stages of life, and a capacity to embrace the mystery and expansiveness of God. So, going back to this one here, if God seems angry to you, then we're going to tend to imagine that God is always against us. It's going to make us susceptible to a crippling sense of failure or a drivenness to earn His favor. If you only ever see God as compassionate, you might struggle with injustice in the world. How could God ever allow this to happen? However, if we can embrace that He is other than us and close to us, we can recognize that we won't always understand His ways, and we can trust that He is working to bring about what's best, even if we don't understand. Does that make sense? I think that you can have maybe a simplistic, naive view of God, and that will work up until some of the storms hit, right? That's when it's like, what happens then? How could this have happened? The reason I'm bringing some of these things up is, how do you think the Israelites viewed God at this point? I mean, they got to see God as almighty, as a warrior, defeating Egypt. He brought the plagues. He comes in justice. He cares about those things. In Egypt, God's justice and mercy are demonstrated side by side. There's the Passover. They are protected from some of those things. They get to see that God cares for them. At Sinai, they've seen God in the storm, like the big cloud over the mountain. Moses speaks with God on the mountain. In all of those things, though, Moses wants more than that. Moses says, this is Exodus 33, 12 through 19. I have a few sections of it. I'm going to read this whole section here. Moses said to the Lord, "See, you say to me, bring up this people, but you have not let me know whom you will send with me. Yet you have said, I know you by name, and you have also found favor in my sight. Now, therefore, if I have found favor in your sight, please show me now your ways, that I may know you in order to find favor in your sight." Consider too that this nation is your people. And he said, my presence will go with you, and I will give you rest. And he said to him, if your presence will not go with me, do not bring us up from here. For how shall it be known that I have found favor in your sight, I am your people? Is it not in your going with us, so that we are distinct, I am your people, from every other people on the face of the earth? And the Lord said to Moses, this very thing that you have spoken I will do. For you have found favor in my sight, and I know you by name. Moses said, please show me your glory. And he said, I will make all my goodness pass before you, and will proclaim before you my name, the Lord. And I will be gracious to whom I will be gracious, and I will show mercy on whom I will show mercy. It's Exodus 33, 12 to 19. For Moses, Yahweh's personal presence with them was non-negotiable. Without him, they were nothing. Everything they were was because of who he was. So, all of these things come about after the golden calf incident. Like, God sort of, it's like, all right, like Moses intercedes. It's like, all right, I don't need to be with you. If I'm with you, I might destroy the people. And God says, I don't want to go if you're not coming with us. You can send somebody, but no, like sending an angel, like I want you with us, right? With all the danger that entails. And I think the same is true for us, right? What matters most about us is to whom we belong. Exodus 33 and 34 are really cool stories. Like Moses has seen God, but he hasn't seen God. You know what I mean? And this is when God declares his name. He did that at the burning bush, but now he's going to declare who he is to Moses. This is Exodus 34, 6 through 7. The Lord, it's Yahweh, Yahweh, a God merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness, keeping steadfast love for thousands, forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin, but who will by no means clear the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children and the children's children to the third and the fourth generation. So, again, this is when Moses goes back to get the new tablets. He got all mad, throws them down, and then he goes back and he's getting the new ones from here. And Yahweh demonstrates grace for those who sin, right? He's gracious, but he takes sin very seriously. God's grace coexists with his justice. They are both integral to his character. You don't have just grace. You don't just have justice. You have them both. And both of those things go hand in hand for who God is. Tell me if you agree with this. Do you tend to focus on what looks negative with the attributes of God here? The thing that I think I would hear frequently was the visiting iniquity on the children and the children's children to the third and fourth generation. It's like, ooh, that sounds bad. But we don't compare that with steadfast love for thousands. You see that? Like, I think that we sometimes focus on that last part without seeing, like, the contrast here is thousands to third and fourth generation.
It's like merciful and gracious and slow to anger.
Yeah, exactly. These are great things. But God is also saying, like, sin is serious, and I'm going to take care of it.
It's that balance.
Right. God isn't willing to let sin continue. It is a mercy, a gift to the community to ensure that sin doesn't continue. But he's quick to forgive. I've heard it described, like if you look at the story with the flood, what God sees is creation destroying itself. And he's cutting and he's putting an end to it. It's a mercy, because if he were to let it continue, it would just be worse and worse and worse and worse. It's stopping it is the mercy. So, I don't know, like, I don't know if that's something that you still need to struggle with or not. I know I do, because I tend to focus sort of on the last part, but it's like, It's a positive portrayal here. Do y'all know this one here? Yeah, go ahead.
Before we get off of that point.
Yes.
The last line there that
Uh-huh.
he showed no means clearly iniquity, the guilty, visiting iniquity of the fathers and the children, and the children's children to the third, fourth generations. If we go back to the Ten Commandments, which was 2 chapters earlier, chapter 20, that same phrase is used again, but he adds a little extra words at the end of it. And he says, using the same phrase, this is where he's talking about one of the commandments here, don't make yourself any idols. He says, I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sins of the fathers to the third and fourth generations of those who hate me.
Yeah.
So I think that when later on, now when this statement is made, he's keeping in mind of the children who hate me. He's not just
That's
punishing children.
That's right.
the children's
That's right.
fathers.
Yeah, yeah.
But the hatred or the disobedience follows down. When one generation does it, another generation usually follows it.
Yes.
And the next one follows that one. And so it's those who follow that same pattern that God punishes.
Yeah. And I think we probably all know, like, maybe I'll restate this. If your blessed groups are doing things like sharing your stories, I think all of us can see cases where, Kara and I were talking about this last night, like how our stories, like, we can see, for one, commonalities, but also like how our parents influenced us. And I asked Kara, I was like, what do you think our kids are where are we gonna fall in their stories, right? But at the same time, if you look at someone like, I don't know, say you have a faithful grandmother or something like that, and the impact, how much greater that impact in your story has over your life. It's like, I mean, I don't know. That's another way that I sometimes think about this too. Thank you, Joe, for bringing that up though. Like, those who hate me, like, it's like there is, it's the same phrase here, yeah. Any other comments on this? Yes.
The last part of that passage, as Joe was saying, it shows me the responsibility that a parent has
Yes.
and the influence, as you just said, on succeeding generations. We all have known the negatives that are all present in some families
Yeah.
versus the positives. The positives are also our responsibility. We need to do that and influence those kids and their kids and the kids after them and tell them to remember this.
Yes.
Remember this, the good thing.
We're going to talk about remembrance in just a little bit too.
Yes.
That shows up a lot.
One more thing.
Yeah.
Less about the last part, but right in the middle where it says, he will forgive the iniquity, but he will not clear the guilty. It's like you might commit an act, and he'll forgive you of the act, but he will not take away all the repercussions. Like if you drink to an excess and destroy your liver, he'll forgive you for drinking too much, but he won't. It's not just going to fix your liver because you repented of drinking. So yeah, consequences. It's like he'll forgive you of your sin, but he won't always remove all the consequences.
I think about David and Bathsheba.
Yeah.
I've forgiven you, and the child is going to die. I'm sorry. There's consequences there, but he also, it's like, he forgives him. That's what God says. I'm going to do a little thing here. This is from this name here. This word, slow to anger, here is one Hebrew word. I don't know how to say it. I don't know if y'all can see that here. That's super hard. It's these three Hebrew characters here, slow, and then anger here. What I want you to see is the literal word is long, and then anger is nose. Have y'all heard, some of you may have heard this before. When you get angry, do you ever feel it in your face? You can feel the heat just getting in there. It's just like, what this is, the actual picture here, it's like a Hebrew idiom. God is long of nose. And what it's saying is like, it takes a long time for that heat to reach the end before you explodes. Does that make sense? And that shows up a lot. And I don't know, it's just like, I think it's sort of fun to see how it, like some of these pictures show up. Like, slow to anger, like that's what it means. But the literal words there are, God is long-nosed. So, not like Pinocchio, right?
We use the phrase short-tempered, but
Yes.
this is the opposite.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I just thought that was neat. Okay, so after seeing God, Moses only wants God to be with him. Moses wants more than a mountaintop experience. He wants the transforming presence of God in their midst, wherever they go. Hopefully, you can see the comparisons for us. God is with us. He sends his Spirit with us, right? When Jesus leaves, he was like, I'm going to leave someone for you. The Comforter, the Spirit. This is just the thought that if anyone is in the Wednesday class, the story of the Bible, one of the three things that shows up in the first few chapters of the Bible is God with us. I mean, that's what's the name? Emmanuel, God with us. That's what Moses wants. And God wants to be with the people too. We see that throughout here. It's right here too. Like, Moses does not want to take the people out, through the 40 years. I don't think they know that it's 40 years yet, but it's like, they don't. They haven't got to the land and done that cycle yet. But he doesn't want to do it by himself. He doesn't want just an angel. He wants God with him. Y'all remember when Moses comes down from the mountain after this experience, what's different about him?
He's glowing.
He's glowing, his face, right? And they're afraid. It's like he's become more of, like God created us in the image of God. It's like he's more in image of God now, being before God, than he was before. Do you see that? The other thing too is like, the Bible calls his people, God's people, his holy ones. This is like a visible reminder that he is one of God's holy ones here. A visible reminder that we are God's treasured possession. Any more comments on this before we move on?
Well, when I was younger, and still a little bit today, is that I used to think of it like almost like a sunburn. Like Moses was like that close to God that he I guess sort of absorbed some of God, like we absorb the sun, and then we visibly we look like we've been too close to the sun. So yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Well, I was just gonna.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was thinking about the last screen,
This one here?
that one and
Yes.
the one before. The slow to, be slow to anger. The people, Israelites, they hadn't been gone that long, and that's a short amount of time to forget all of the blessings that God has given you along the way. And it's just kind of hard to believe that it would happen so quickly.
Yeah. One other thing too, that just triggered a thought. Don't quote me on this, but I think that I remember hearing from someone that the first time that the words get angry, that shows that God gets angry about something, aren't in Genesis. They're in Exodus. when Moses doesn't want to go to save his people. Like, God shows that he regrets his creation. He uses that language with the flood. But in terms of him getting angry, it's when his chosen person doesn't want to go and save and rescue his people. So it was something where it's just the ways that he gets angry. It's like he gets angry about different things than we think he does sometimes.
I have a theory about why the Israelites treated God the way they did. They treated God. Yeah, I'm not sure it's correct. From reading through the scriptures, the Israelites were slaves for 400 years in Egypt, and God wasn't. They didn't feel God was with them. Then suddenly God comes on the scene when Moses arrives with the miracles. Now they feel, and they exit Egypt, they go through the Red Sea, they now feel God's with them. But then Moses goes up onto the mountain for 40 days, and they probably felt God's gone now. He's not with us anymore. And during that absence, they think, well, we got to have a God that's going to be with us. So they make this golden calf, the idol that they worship. And I think they're having an idea that God comes and goes. That he's with them, he was with out for 400 years, he came, he got him across the Red Sea, he left him after Mount Sinai, and maybe not coming back. Maybe even for another 400 years. Maybe that's their mindset, that they're coming out of that kind of the years, centuries mindset. So it's taken them a while to realize that this God that rescued them is not going to leave them. He's going to stay, but they're not getting it yet.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's what they're thinking, but that's what it seems like.
It's
It
interesting.
kind of goes along with what we know about kids who have experienced loss early on, and then when they get loving caretakers, they test and test and test to see, are you still going to stay? Are you still going to love me?
Kind of like children do today.
Yeah, exactly.
That's good. Yes.
I think a lot of that goes back to how the Jews regarded Moses way on down, past the kings, even, at the time of Christ, they regarded Moses as, and the Bible calls him holy man, God. But he was almost God to them.
Alan, were you going to say something?
Yeah. So for years, I read this and I see me. And I saw me in the Israelites, and the question is a legitimate question. How do you forget something? And so I tell everybody, and I recommended this to a lot of people who come out of drug rehabilitation or whatever, write a book. Everybody should write a book. Every Christian, I believe, should write a book. In fact, part of Deuteronomy says every king should write his own book. He should copy this book, and so he knows the rules and have his own copy. But you should write your own book, because this book right here is to remind people of what God did for us.
Yes.
And God has done powerful, amazing things for every one of us as Christians. And when things get bad, we immediately forget. And we immediately walk away and we start looking for something to take God's place. And if you have it written down where you could go back and reread, oh yeah, I remember what he did for me. That's what the book's for. I think they're stupid, and so am I.
That's right. Yes.
Because I have forgotten, just like they did, it's just as quickly, what God's done for me, and I'm off on some,
For me, it doesn't take 40 days.
No, I wish it did.
And they lost the book, not.
Oh, yeah.
And the Bible said, they found the book, when, when I can't remember the name, the priest was sent to the temple. They found the book singular, no copies.
We don't find any kings, as far as I know, who makes their own copy of it. So, yeah. I'm hearing a whole lot of memory stuff, remembering, which is a good thing to go over here for numbers. That shows up a lot in here. So I feel like we actually have a pretty good, if you remember, Steve Clover walked us through numbers, so it's like you may already have a little bit of excitement with numbers. I gotta say though, it's like, man, the name, like I almost wish it had the Hebrew name, I think is like in the wilderness. It's a lot more exciting than numbers. I mean, it's like, oh, I'm sure some of you like accounting. So, you know, it starts with accounting. We get a list of names. We get a census of the fighting men of Israel. I was thinking at work, when I'm working with various clients, sometimes I like to see an org chart. Do you know what an org chart is? It's like, org chart is, you got the CEO, and then under the CEO, you've got their VPs, then you've got under them, you've got them, and you can see, and the reason I care about it is to know group dynamics. So it's like, all right, I'm working with this department over here, but we want them to do something. Who do they report? Find the common person, go to them, talk to them, see, and they can start putting pressure, making things happen within a client. And so it's like, that's sort of what this is for Israel, is who's who? Where do they fit in? What's going on? Remember, they have spent, depending on which, like 400 years or 4 generations, in slavery. Who are they? They're slaves. Not anymore. Now they are a people. Now they are God's treasured possession. So think about that dynamic as we think about some of this. So 400 years. So, I mean, Joe, to what you were saying, they've probably heard some of the stories about Abraham. That's a long time ago. Your life is working for Pharaoh. What kind of identity do you have? I mean, you don't have a day off. Like when Pharaoh says you're not going to get any straw, like, what are we going to do? What have you done to us? You're free now. God has called you his treasured possession. Now you have a role. Your tribe has a place in the entire camp. This was the analogy I came up with. Kara, our kids love to look at yearbooks, right? They love it. And you know what they always do? They turn to the page that has a picture of them. And they're like, oh, look at this. And then they don't look at anything else. They just like to look at pictures of themselves. That's it. You know why? They were there. It's a way to remember. They remember what it was like. Maybe they'll say something like, hey, when you come to this grade, maybe you'll have this teacher. I mean, they love to, like, Alden's not in elementary school yet. They love to get the books out and show him. He doesn't know who these people are. I'm like, great. I get to sit with my sister here and look at this. But they care. In this case, families can see their tribal names recited, their ancestors' names recited. There is a connection to history here. This is from Imes, the author of the book. It's as if God whispers in each ear, you no longer belong to Pharaoh. You belong to me. I know your name. You are mine. You matter. You spent your entire life making bricks to build someone else's kingdom, making their vision a reality. But everything's different now. Your story is much older than Egypt. It stretches all the way back to a promise, and your future is bursting with possibility. Your family's name is on the roster of a new nation. You belong. You count. I will give you your own land, and you will govern yourselves. It's pretty cool. I usually skim over these lists. But if my grandfather's name was in there, I would be going to that line, and I might skim it, and then I'd say that one real loud. I want everyone to know, right? Here's another analogy that might connect more with us. Y'all know what this is? Yeah. Tons of people go there every year, right? What are they doing? It's a bunch of names, right? They matter, right? So, I don't know, like we have things that are similar to this. The stories in Numbers, those names don't connect to us because we are so distant from that. I mean, also we were grafted into Israel. I don't think there's any Jews in here. We can't find our line back. If we could, might actually be pretty interesting to, we want to know those names and numbers, right? But, like, we understand this. We understand, I don't know if any of you like the Ancestry.com stuff. Like, we understand an interest in our history. The difference is we just aren't connected to this story as much, right?
The more you look at it, the more connected you get.
Yeah. Yeah,
I'm really into it.
Well, then you find somebody, right? It's like,
Tons.
you send an email or something. It's like, oh, you're my second cousin, fourth removed. What?
No.
Maybe not that, but there's connection. So here's what's really cool. In the middle of this, we get the priestly blessing. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to Aaron and his sons, saying, thus you shall bless the people of Israel. You shall say to them, the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. So shall they put my name upon the people of Israel, and I will bless them." Do you see that connection there to the bearing God's name command? They have the name on them. This is after the golden calf, right? We still sing this song. This is probably one of I will bet it's the most famous verse from Numbers. And it's one of the most famous from the first 5 books of the Old Testament here. In the ancient Near East, slaves were often tattooed with their owner's name, either on their forehead or on their forearm. They might even be branded. In this case, this is God putting his name on them. You see that? They don't belong to any people. They belong to God. Now they willingly belong to Yahweh. They bear his name, dedicating their lives to his service. It's like an invisible mark. To have this blessing invoked over them reinforces the idea that Israel is selected for a particular purpose. As bearers of Yahweh's name, they represent him among the nations. Everyone is watching the Israelites to find out what sort of God Yahweh really is. Everyone is watching. All of this is about how people are going to perceive God. Others should be able to tell just by looking at Israel that they belong to Yahweh. What they wear, what they eat, how they treat one another, who they are intimate with, how they do business. All these reflect on Yahweh. Israel declares their covenantal status by living according to Yahweh's instructions. If they fail, Yahweh's name, his reputation, is at stake. When they do fail, the prophets charge them with profaning Yahweh's name among the nations. After this, the directions change a little bit. It said this was going to come up. This is Deuteronomy 8. Remember how the Lord your God led you all the way in the wilderness these 40 years to humble and test you in order to know what was in your heart, whether or not you would keep his commands. As a man disciplines his son, so the Lord your God disciplines you. And then, what do all these laws mean? We were slaves of Pharaoh in Egypt, but the Lord brought us out of Egypt with a mighty hand. Before our eyes, the Lord sent signs and wonders, great and terrible, in Egypt and Pharaoh and his whole household. But he brought us out from there to bring us in and give us the land he promised on oath to our ancestors. The Lord commanded us to obey all these decrees and to fear the Lord our God, so that we might always prosper and be kept alive, as is the case today. And if we are careful to obey all these law before the Lord our God, as he has commanded us, that will be our righteousness. All of this is about remembering. Repetition is important. Calendars are important for the people. You probably have a tradition in your family that's like, that is the tradition, right? Like, maybe it's around Christmas. That's one of the big things in our family. If Israel forgets their story, they're in danger of forgetting who they are and to whom they belong. So it's all about remembering here. The numbers are about that. So, wrapping up some of the numbers things here. In Numbers 10, it's time to march. They're going to start heading out. We haven't hit the spies and the 40 years quite yet. We did jump ahead a few times. But the ark contains the tablets. It's out in front. Then we have 3 tribes. Tabernacle's taken apart. It's carried by the Levites. 3 more tribes. Tabernacle furniture, some more Levites. 3 more tribes, and then 3 tribes as a rear guard. They are organized. It's like they left Egypt as slaves. Now they're a structure. Now they are a people. Now they all have jobs. Like the structure just shows up here, and it's like that had a whole lot to do there. Any comments before we get into next section?
Well, this last verse that you just read in Deuteronomy 25, and it says, and if we are careful to obey all the laws before the Lord our God, as he commanded us, that would be our righteousness. Reminded me when I was in Alan's class a few weeks ago, he brought up the question, what is righteousness? Because we were talking about how we need to be righteous. And the definition that Alan gave, I thought was great, is doing the right thing.
Yes.
That's righteousness, doing the right thing. And here, in this verse, it's telling us what is the right thing. And it's saying, be careful to obey what God tells us to do, his commandments. That's the right thing to do.
Yep. That's great. Okay. The next thing, instead of Torah time, have complicated counting. Okay. Got my, how many Israelites left? Left Egypt.
Usually or are remaining.
How many Israelites left Egypt? 600,000?
3 million.
It was, yeah, like.
All of them that were supposed to.
So, all of the ones that were supposed to. So, the reason I want to bring this part up, this was something that I did not know in the book. I've heard this before. You've probably heard, like, some archaeologists are like, that couldn't happen. So, there are multiple approaches that people who follow God can take. It's up to you and me to interpret those things. But what I want you to be aware of is when someone comes with a challenge, like, we don't just need to ignore it and pretend that they're not saying it, because God is bigger than that, right? Like, this is not a reason to say the Bible isn't true. We shouldn't run from those things, okay? So, why even question in the first place? Archaeologists' best estimates on population sizes here and in Egypt are much lower. Sometimes the skeptics use this to say it didn't happen. It also makes some of the biblical text hard to explain. How did 12 sons of Jacob become a nation of 2 million in 4 generations? Or 400 years, depends on which one you look at. So this next one is the part where it's like, okay, this is pretty tough here. If the total number of males over 20 years old is 600,000, then males of all ages would total over 1 million. Numbers 343 lists the total of firstborn males as only 22,000. If there were 1 million men total, then the number of firstborns compared to the total number of men would yield a ratio of 50 to 1. And that's only counting males, not females. That means every Israelite mother would have averaged 100 children. Any moms who are excited about that? I had not heard this before. So this is just taking the numbers at face value too. So what do? We could assume the archaeologists are wrong, which is possible. I still have a problem with 100 kids. I've got 4, and that feels like a lot, okay? And this is not even in the times of Genesis where the people live for hundreds of years, right? So maybe they're rhetorical or symbolic. Like, maybe there's something there like, my kids love to say it's going to take 1 million years to get somewhere. Is that what's happening here? I don't know. So here's another possibility that is interesting. I like to show you all the Hebrew stuff, right? I don't speak Hebrew, but I like to look at it. We might be translating something wrong. This is the word, the Hebrew word is Elective. So over here, 600,000, and this is the word, it can be 1,000 as a number, it can also be 1,000 as for company, like a unit. Over here in Judges, It's translated family here, but it's the same word. Y'all see that? So, this is Joshua 20, sorry, I said Judges. Judges, this is Gideon saying this in Judges 6:15. Pardon me, my Lord, Gideon replied. How can I save Israel? My Eleph, my 1,000, or family, is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my family. Joshua 22 is the same one. When he sent, with him they sent 10 of the chief men, one from each of the tribes of Israel, each the head of a family division among the Israelite Eleph. That is the word that we get translated as 1,000. But sometimes it gets translated as family or clan or tribe. Sorry. It's right here. This is an approach. I'm not saying it is. It's up to us to figure this out. In Exodus 12:13, military units is a smoother fit than clans, since the whole phrase indicates that men alone are being counted. 600 Eleph on foot, men without children. The tribe of Reuben, for example, includes 46 Eleph and 500. Humphreys argues that this could be read as 46 military units totaling 500 men. Using this as his basis, he calculates that the average Israelite military unit must have consisted of just over 9 men for 2 families. This figure corresponds roughly to the size of military troops in this tablet here, where on separate occasions a king requests troops of 10 or 20 men. In Israel's case, Humphreys proposes a total of 5,500 men over 20 years old, bringing the overall total for Exodus to roughly 22,000 men, women, and children. Again, I'm not saying this is what it is. I'm not a biblical scholar. I am not an archaeologist. I'm not a lawyer or an accountant. But I don't want you to feel like you have to run away from some of these things. I've heard this one before. This is a way to translate this. It's a different language. They didn't have our numbers like 1, 2, 3, 4. They had words that sometimes meant that, like legion. Is legion 1,000 or is legion many? So this is just something to wrestle with. Just letting you know, you don't have to run away from it. God is bigger than all.